Good afternoon, all. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here today, here at the summit, speaking about a connected Tobago. I am Anisa Duncan, as was told, from the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, and I'll be here today presenting on the role of the authority in the telecommunications and broadcasting sectors. Just a quick outline about my presentation today. I'll be focusing on three main areas: the mandate of the authority, the key achievements, as well as the key focus areas moving forward. So who is the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, or TATT as we are commonly known? TATT is the regulator in Trinidad and Tobago responsible for regulating telecommunications and broadcasting, as well as managing the spectrum resources of the country. We are governed by the Telecommunications Act, Chapter 4731, and we became operational in 2004 with a mandate to transform the telecommunications sector and to regulate the transformed sector. Specifically, sorry, I would have missed our mandate, getting a bit of technical. Okay, there we go. Okay, it's not staying on the slide. Specifically, our mandate would be to transform the telecommunications and broadcasting sector from the virtual monopoly that it was prior to 2004, and to manage that sector to a competitive environment. Our other mandates speak to monitoring and regulating the sector, as well as preventing anti-competitive practices. Our objects of the Act, which is mainly our goals. So this slide here shows, this is the list of what everyone at the authority works towards. Everything that we do, we benchmark on these 6 objects of the Act. These are our main goals. And the first goal would be creating an open telecommunications market, one in which there are conditions for fair competition, ensuring the orderly development of telecommunications, and that is to safeguard, enrich, and strengthen society's social, cultural, and economic well-being. We also focus on protecting and promoting the public interest, and we do this in 3 main areas: ensuring that we have accessibility for the services. The services must be affordable, and we strive to ensure that there's a high quality of service. We also focus on facilitating universal access to telecommunications, and that means having services available to all persons. I will speak a little more about this later on in the presentation. We also seek to encourage investment in the sector. Without investment, the sector will not be able to grow, so we try to have an enabling environment such that persons will be willing to invest in the sector. And last, we also regulate broadcasting services, and we do this consistent with sections 4 and 5 of the Constitution. And if you can recall, section 4 and 5 speaks about freedom of expression. So whatever we do in terms of regulating the broadcasting sector, we must do so without infringing on persons' freedom of expression. So a bit on TATT's scope of activity. What does TATT regulate? And basically what we regulate would entail wholesale and retail prices for telecommunication services, customer service standards, technical standards, the radio frequency spectrum, telephone numbers, as well as broadcast content. And who does TATT regulate? Who are the players that fall under the ambit of TATT? And these would include domestic, mobile, fixed voice, as well as internet service providers, and international facilities and services providers. In terms of broadcasting, we regulate free-to-air radio as well as free-to-air television. and pay TV or cable, as we call it. At TATT, we developed an authorization framework so that each player must be authorized to operate within the sector. This authorization framework sets out the guidelines for persons who are within the market, as well as the behavior for those who have entered the market. We have two instruments as stated in our Act: a concession and a license. A concession is required if you are providing a public service, and these are granted by the minister based on the recommendation of the authority. You will also require a license if you are using the network, services, or equipment using the radio communications, and these are granted specifically by the authority. So let us now move on to some of the achievements that we have done since inception, since 2004. In the early years, the authority focused on opening the markets to competition, and we started with authorizing a new mobile operator, as well as international operators. In doing this, we would have removed the monopoly in the mobile market as well as the international market. And as we know, this would have significantly reduced prices from 2004 to now. In 2006, we would have authorized new entrants into free-to-air TV and free-to-air radio. And of course, there was a new entrant in 2012 for a radio station specifically for Tobago. In 2007, new entrants would have entered the market in terms of internet, fixed voice, and subscription TV. Indeed, today we can say that we have an open telecommunications market. Currently operating, we have 7 fixed voice operators in Trinidad and Tobago, 2 mobile operators, 11 fixed internet operators, 7 international service providers, 13 subscription TV operators providing services in various coverage areas, 37 free-to-air radio stations, as well as 15 local television stations, 6 of which operate free-to-air television, and 9 operate via the cable networks. In terms of the development of the national telecommunications infrastructure, TATT also promoted facilities-based competition, and this would have increased the telecommunications infrastructure within the country. Over the few years, we have licensed 1 additional mobile network, 11 additional fixed wired network, 5 additional fixed wireless network, 1 satellite TV provider, and 2 international cable landing stations. Of course, this would be the change prior, where only TSTT would have had a network. So these would have been the additional networks that came subsequent to TATT. We also facilitated the establishment of a local internet exchange point. And what this means is that ISPs can now route their traffic directly from one operator to another operator. Previously, if you had to send an email, that email would have had to go to Miami and come back to the person in Trinidad. Now, I can send an email directly to you, and it does not need to go to Miami. While opening up the markets to competition, what is also important is a regulatory framework, and TATT placed a very high priority on this. As a result, we developed several policies and regulatory frameworks consistent with the requirements in the Act. We have also developed regulations such as the fees regulations, interconnection regulations, access to facilities regulations. And these regulations simply provide rules to the market to ensure that they are operating fairly and in the best interest of consumers. In terms of managing competition, which was something needed after the sector was transformed from a monopoly to a competitive environment, we have established regulatory guiding principles. And these provide guidelines to the authority so that we can provide a consistent approach to regulating the market in terms of competition. We've also approved mergers and consolidations, and these were done subsequent to a thorough investigation and assessment to ensure that the merger does not result in a significant lessening of competition within the market. We conduct market assessments, and these are done every strategic period, which is every 3 years, to ensure that we are meeting our mandate. In terms of universal access to telecommunications, the Act states, in accordance with the policy established by the Minister, the authority shall determine the public telecommunication services in respect of which the requirement of universal service shall apply. Now, I'm not a lawyer, and when I read this, I'm a bit confused. It doesn't really say much to me. But basically, we're saying that the minister who is responsible for telecommunications sets the universal service policy, and the authority will determine which public telecommunication services are required for universal service. As a result, the authority has developed a universal service framework, and we have said that universal access for Trinidad and Tobago is one where 100% of the country's population can access affordable basic telecommunications services. And by basic, we mean it's available, affordable, and accessible. In terms of availability, what does that mean to us? Availability, we mean the level of service is the same for all users in their place of work or residence at all times and without geographical discrimination. By affordability, we mean for all users, the price of the service should not be a factor that limits service access. By accessibility, all subscribers should be treated in a non-discriminatory manner with respect to the price, service, and quality of service in all places without distinction. So that we've created the Universal Service Regulations, and the Universal Service Fund has been established. This was only done in 2005, and we are now starting to operationalize the fund and work towards achieving what is stated in the regulations. Let us now look at some of the results in terms of the uptake of telecommunication services in Trinidad and Tobago. In terms of mobile subscriptions, in 5 years, we have moved from 1.88 million mobile voice subscriptions to 2.17 million in 2016. That has resulted in a very favorable mobile penetration rate. In 2016, 160% of the population subscribed to mobile voice services. That means that more persons have more than one phone. In terms of internet, fixed internet subscriptions increased steadily from 2005 to 2015 and then decreased a bit in 2016. That has resulted in a household internet penetration of just about 60%. So 60% of households within Trinidad and Tobago subscribed to fixed internet services in 2016. In terms of mobile internet users, there are approximately 707 mobile internet users in 2016. And this data refers to active mobile internet users. So at the time of data collection, which would be December for that figure, persons would have used the phones within the last 3 months. In terms of pay TV or cable TV, there were 206.7 thousand pay TV subscriptions, and that accounts for just about half of the number of households within Trinidad and Tobago. In terms of fixed voice subscriptions, although those fixed voice subscriptions, as we know, have been declining within Trinidad and Tobago over the last 5 years, it's been relatively stable. Although we saw a sharp decline prior to 2012, from 2012 to 2016, it has been relatively stable. And in fact, 2016, we actually saw an increase from 269,000 to 271,000. And like I said earlier, there are 7 fixed voice operators in Trinidad and Tobago. So we've had some new operators coming into the market in 2016. In terms of the numbers, in terms of penetration, again, just about half of the population subscribe to these services in terms of households. How do we compare in terms of the region? Well, in terms of mobile penetration, among the CARICOM countries, we are ranking number 1. So we have the highest mobile voice penetration in the CARICOM countries. In terms of fixed voice penetration, we are 9th in terms with 20.2. Please note that this data is from Business Monitor International and not from TATT. In terms of internet users per 100 inhabitants, we are first in the region with 62.5 out of every 100 persons being an internet user. Business Monitor International does not distinguish between a fixed internet user and a mobile internet user. They simply count internet users. So what are our key areas of focus going forward? Firstly, we will be working steadfast in finalizing the following regulations that will help to assist us to effectively monitor and regulate the sector. High on the agenda would be the submission of information regulations, pricing regulations, numbering regulations, and a few others that we are currently amending, including the radio spectrum regulation, interconnection amendment regulation, access to facilities amendment regulation, and universal service amendment regulations. Another area that is very important to us would be amendments to the Telecommunications Act, and we are doing this to facilitate compliance with the Economic Partnership Agreement, as well as to ensure a more robust competition regulation in the sector and to facilitate better enforcement in the sector. We will also be looking at the implementation of fixed number portability, and mobile number portability is already in place. As you may or may not know, number portability allows you to switch operators and keep your number. Implementation of initiatives to facilitate universal service. We are working alongside the government with a national free Wi-Fi initiative, and this looks at providing free Wi-Fi in the first instance on PTSC buses available to everyone who rides the bus. The second phase would look at offering free Wi-Fi in public spaces such as hospitals and libraries. The second PWD the second Universal Service Initiative focuses on a project for persons with disabilities, and this will entail subsidizing mobile handsets to persons with disabilities so that they can enjoy the services that we enjoy as well. All right? just recall that the goal here is to have universal service, so no one should be left out of the digital society. Two other areas moving forward would be the migration plan for switchover to digital free-to-air TV. And this would focus on changing from the current analog system to a digital system. The current model is one in which each free-to-air TV has its own network. The intention is to have a signal distributor that will reduce the cost to new television operators, and they would be able to distribute television services throughout the country. We are also working on a position on over-the-top services and net neutrality. We're also seeking to align the FM radio band plan, and of course this is going to move radio stations to even spacing, as well as increase the number of spectrum available for radio stations. Thus, we can have more radio stations when we align the FM band plan. And last, we are going to assign additional spectrum to facilitate broadband access, and this will enhance the broadband services available to the country.
Oh, yes.
That's good to hear. Somebody's happy about that. All right. This brings me basically to the end of my presentation. And just to summarize, the telecommunications landscape in Trinidad and Tobago has been transformed under TATT's watch. We are very happy about this, and we're very proud of this. And this is evidenced by the multiple players that exist in each market. However, we note that the telecommunications market is evolving at an ever-increasing pace, and for this reason, regulations must be flexible going forward. We have to balance setting tight rules with facilitating innovation within the sector.